Hello, and welcome to the Argyle AI ML Technology Leadership Summit. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions during the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Today we have Jeffrey Wright, Global Solution Owner Digital Experience at Mondelez International. We're excited to have Jeffrey for his keynote presentation titled AI ML, Is There Anything They Can't Do? Welcome, Jeffrey. Over to you.
Thanks, Eric. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot to cover and a lot of my thoughts that I kind of put together. But I will start with a question for everybody, which is defining experience, right? Everyone has their own unique interpretation of what experience is. Some people think it's just, it's just how you feel about a product or a situation. Other people feel like it's just an entity or some type of, cosmic foam that you can't really grab onto. But I personally believe that, finding out or discovering what experience people are looking for in a positive light is really the most important thing before you even start looking into AI or any type of like RPA, IPA, chatbots, any type of autonomous entity that's going to help you do what you need to do better, faster, maybe cheaper, so that you can kind of get back to doing what you love to do. Most people that I speak with in this space focus on helping the employee. And I do love the idea of focusing on employees and their experiences, but I think that's a very that's like a sushi menu. It's just one piece of the sushi roll that we're looking at. When I often talk at a lot of these engagements, people are people, and I know that sounds so easy to say, but people are, they're soccer players, they're mothers, fathers, sons, gardeners, bird watchers. Everybody has a different spectrum on experience. And if you're not looking at those specific data points, and I don't even like to say even data points, if you're not looking at those personal pieces to these employees, you're really missing so many different potential positive impacts that you could make to your employees or your customers or anybody you're working with for that matter, in life and in your job. I will do my best to find out, what generation prefers one thing over the other. I was actually just speaking with our colleague here, Eric, yesterday on an ad hoc conversation about, what specific experiences or experiences overall look like to so many different generations. And it doesn't really scale the same way you would think. I believe from like the 1800s, and I'm only going back to the 1800s, we could probably go back to like the dawn of time, but from the 1800s to the 1900s, people's grandfathers, great-grandfathers, fathers, sisters, brothers, mothers, they all had a consistent experience, right? In the 1800s, you woke up when the sun came up, you went to bed when the sun went down. You had a specific amount of chores. Everything was kind of manual. And your grandfather could show you, or your grandmother could show you how to do a specific task on the farm, at your house, wherever you were. And the kid would be, in his, I don't know, single digits or teens. They all have the same access and the same experiences over a 100-year period because nothing really changed that much. Then, of course, the 1900s into the 1950s, and that's even a little bit different. People at that age, you had the Great Depression, you had different external factors that caused, the wars and so many other things that someone's experience was much different. People that lived through the Great Depression, anybody on this call that's too young or doesn't know, the Great Depression was a really bad thing in the US. And then World War I and World War II. they were, very financially focused. They would penny pinch. Anybody that's my age, their grandmothers, the worth of a dollar or a quarter or a penny was much more than somebody today, right? If you told a kid today, hey, I'll give you a penny or a quarter, like that's the joke, right? They'll throw it away almost, or they'll use it as a screwdriver before they really consider it currency. So it kind of got, it sped up. There was a quickening, 1950 to 1960 and 70. You have a lot of people that, the 50s was kind of old school. The 60s were kind of new school. There was a whole big, enlightenment phase in the 70s. And now that 30-year gap, if you were born in the 40s and 50s, your experience is going to be different now in the 60s and then the 70s. And then in the 80s, it got even more condensed because technology started to speed up, right? And that's where it comes into our space. And then the 90s, it got even faster because cellular phones were more accessible, availability got more accessible. So the experience of someone in the 80s and the 90s got even tighter, right? Your grandfather in the 90s had no concept. He was kind of lost. Her grandmother was so lost. Her grandperson was so lost. And then, of course, from 2000 until now, this 22-year period, people that are born in 2000, people still kind of had flip phones. Things were still coming about. I mean, talking to people now that's saying like, dude, there was no iPhone then, right? They don't understand it almost. But that 10 years from 2000 to 2010 was even more condensed with technological advances and experience of what people had. And now from, of course, 2010 to now, I feel like generations, we talk about, Gen Z and millennials. I feel like where it used to be like in the 1800s, where that was like Gen horseback riding, which was like, 100 years long, are now in a spot where it's every 5 or 10 years, I feel almost like every 5 years, I feel like there's a technological boom, and that almost forms its own marker on the timeline as a new generation. The people that were in, their early teens in 2010, 2015, right? Compared to the kids that are young now being born, that when they're 2 months old, they have an iPad, or they're so connected, and they're not jaded, but the experience spectrum is huge upon what makes somebody digitally happy versus somebody that's digitally sad, let's call it, right? Which now comes back to the talking point of AI, and how does data and AI and experience tie together so that you can help your customer or your employee or just the people around you in general to give you a better understanding of how do people feel as the individuals that we are about scaling up and automating certain things. We've all had the talking points around, the service desk is horrible. People don't want to do their jobs. People are quiet quitting. I myself went through an experience where I tried to buy out my car at the end of a lease, and it was brutal getting anybody that wanted to help me genuinely and get me over the finish line. And this is with a big bank too. This isn't like, online or anything like that. And it's sure enough, the person that ended up helping me ended up like at the tail end of it, resigned or wasn't at the company anymore because they got hired to go somewhere else. People like talented people like people that can work and work hard, but that experience a great experience is very difficult to outsource, or a great experience is very difficult to extract from thin air. You have to understand that everyone as an individual wants to have, I think individually they want to have a good experience, but if you zoom out big enough, it's easy to say, well, nobody wants to have to talk to a chatbot or use autonomous actions or orchestration to just get it done. We all suffer through it. It's a whole silent sufferers thing. We all suffer through it. But I personally believe being an individual and still having that human contact, or emotional contact with your customer and your employee is only going to get even more in demand. So as we focus more on automating and orchestrating and getting all of the easy tasks out of the way that robots and AI and machine learning and stuff can do, I only think it's a matter of time before somebody really at the top begins to turn the dials in the right way to make sure that you personally and the customer and the employee have an incredible experience, not just at work, right? But no matter where you are during the day or night or what you're doing. So I know that was probably a lot to digest, and that's just, you know, my mind spewing out a lot of my thoughts when it comes to experience. Next question is, how do we do a better job of getting, you know, the individual tailored experience for every employee, customer, and person? So I talk about employee sentiment. How do you get people to tell you how they truly feel about a product? How do you get people to, or people, or anything for that matter? How do you get people to give you the true boiled down essence of what really makes their heart light turn on and they feel really good about what you've done or what you're doing? And the first step is, you know, I like to use myself. I'm probably in a small percentage, but I like to use myself and say, like, you know, would this make me happy? Would this ultimately, and I mean, I have to be unbelievably super duper honest with myself, because we've all done projects or we've done large scale things at companies or in life. You know, you're remodeling your bathroom, whatever it is. Do you feel that when it's completed that you truly feel that you love it and that it makes you happy or brings a smile to your face? And 9 out of 10, when I do things, it doesn't really bring a smile to my face. It just, you know, it's like a necessary evil. Like, okay, we have a lot of, you know, calls coming into the service desk, or we have a lot of calls coming into a specific call center, and we're trying to address, you know, this issue at the heart, you know, problem management. More often than not, it's okay. But interestingly enough, and if you work at a company that allows you to do things like this, there's always a way that you can bring a smile somewhere. You know, working fun, working in a way that makes people just grin or smile a little bit. I tried to do a dancing baby. If we all remember the dancing baby, little dancing baby on the screen, I actually wanted to hide little Easter eggs in my chatbot, so that people could, you know, like it would spread, right? Like, oh, if you type in dancing baby into the chatbot, you get a dancing baby on your screen, right? And yeah, it's not it doesn't add much value. A lot of people will be like, well, what's the value add of a dancing baby on my screen? Well, from an experience standpoint, if I'm having a horrible day and somebody says to me, or just a regular day, and someone says, hey, did you try typing in dancing baby into the chatbot? And they do it and they smile even for a split second, or they grin. That person, like that smile, that little bit of happiness echoes into the universe. A good colleague of mine always talks about employee sentiment being, you know, something that amplifies around everything that you do. You know, if I can give somebody a small smile or make them feel just a little bit better, or individualize something in our autonomous actions or orchestration or AI, if we can make somebody just smile just a little bit, that person, you know, science, right? We're just talking science. That person's going to be a little bit happier, which means the next person they talk to, they might have a little bit more of a lighthearted feeling, or they might be a little more positive around a subject, or they might go to take the garbage can in, and when they stub their toe, they're not as pissed off because they had a little bit of a smile loaded into their head from earlier, right? It's holistically thinking, how do we make the experience as pure bliss as possible? And it's challenging. We all have big challenges and big problems to solve. And it used to be labor, and we'll segue into labor. Labor is a really tight thing right now. A lot of data is pointing towards we're going to have an even tighter labor market. But the truth of the matter is, not a lot of people are taking these roles or these quote unquote quiet quitting. It used to be where workforce was just tight. Now we're not even sure where the workforce can be good or where we can get the good workforce for, for a price point that the business can afford without sacrificing quality. And the issue at hand is experience, I think. If the service desk is, or the call center, or even the people the people around you, if they don't have a positive experience with what me or I or internal IT is providing the company, they're going to be disengaged. And it's you could say it's almost an impossible task to say, oh well, Jeff, I work at a company that has 100,000 employees, 200,000 employees. Nobody even knows my name. How do I make an impact? How do I make an impact on the overall experience utilizing the tools that I have access to? And the truth of the matter is, I don't know. But my question would be, what haven't you tried? Everybody and their mother has a podcast now. Do an internal podcast around how you can better help people get a smile, or put together an all hands high five meeting with hot dogs and hamburgers or vegan burgers or whatever the diet choice is these days. I feel like there's 5 million diets, bowl of air and a glass of water, whatever the diet is. Bring people together. So many people focus on the hybrid work environment and everybody went remote. Not that it's a bad thing. I think it gave everybody proof that every employee that's in IT especially can work from wherever they want to. But at the same time, there is something that, it's not tangible, but there is something about being in proximity of other smart people or other people in general. I don't even have to be smart, just other people. Because don't just hang around smart people, because then you'll never understand what other people need, right? Just expose yourself and being in proximity with the people you work with and the employees that you have and the customers that you deal with. Some people don't want to meet. Some people are still in this funk of remote stuff, but it is really still important to have this visual interaction with your teams, your employees, your people, to get a heartbeat, a pulse on things that are changing. I myself have blind spots. I had a recent project where I was doing some hefty automation and doing some really cool stuff that I felt was awesome, right? And this is remote. This is the past year. Everything's great. And then we had a fun get together. Everybody that was working remote, the office was dead. Everyone came in, and I found out the hard way that everyone hated what I was doing. So, and I feel like sometimes it's in person that we get the ability to say things with more honesty than we usually do. Most of the time when people are over email or even in a hybrid environment or over Teams, they'll often say things like, yeah, it's fine, it's great. But I happen to be a pretty open-hearted person where they'll tell me, Jeff, it's really not great. So with the labor market being tight, the experiences being on the lower end of things for some companies, do what you can to make sure you're engaged. And if you haven't tried something or you think there's something you can try, do it, right? I talk about podcasts, but so many people that I speak to outside calls like this say, Jeff, what would you do? How would you do it? And it's such a loaded question. What do you have at your disposal to be able to give everybody that two-way feedback and that heartbeat and that pulse on whatever you're doing for that experience? It's hard for me to be specific because again, every individual is different, right? But if I had to say it, check, find streams and channels that are, of course, legally available to you. You can't just start a YouTube channel and say like, this is great or this sucks. But what you can do is you can really focus on what do you control what's in your realm. If you want to do a quick, podcast, a newsletter. I don't know how many people here have Adobe Express. It's really inexpensive. There's even some other free stuff that you can use, that pops, put together a culture club, a council. I like culture club. I think it's a kind of cool, buzzy thing. Those of us that are old enough know that it's a band. Those of us that aren't old enough think it sounds cool. So culture clubs are cool because it helps bring together. And by the way, when I say culture club, make sure it's not all guys like me. Make sure that culture club is, all of the generation bands that I spoke about earlier, right? Make sure that you have somebody, from the 1800s, if you're lucky, right? There might be somebody still alive, but try to have people from all the different generation bands to get their understanding of how what you're doing truly impacts them and what their experience would be. Again, blind spots. I have a ton of them. I'm getting better at them. And by doing that, like I have somebody that's in their late teens. I think he's 18 or 19 years old. And it's insane for at least me. There's plenty of people on this call that might be closer to that age bracket that will say something like, "Oh no, that totally makes sense. Like, why would I do that?" Like Chromebooks, right? Interestingly enough, and I see this, I see this, in my head. Every kid has a Chromebook now. Every kid has a Chromebook, right? Every kid has a Chromebook. Like high school, I think even in college now, they're giving out Chromebooks. And if we think everyone's going to be in a Microsoft shop in 2, 3, 4, 10 years from now, I don't believe that's going to be the case. We have a lot of people that are in their late teens that are focusing on the new influx of, I want a Chromebook. Where's my Chromebook? And I never thought I'd see the day. I always thought Chromebooks being like whatever, but it's now it's, hey, do you guys offer Chromebooks? Like we're all web, right? We all have an O365 license. We have a web interface. We have all these things. Where is it? And, I shrug my shoulders and I'm like, how about a MacBook? And it wasn't too long ago where Macs were shiny, they're pretty, they're gorgeous. People like Macs. Everyone always asks for a Mac. And the paradigm shift for me, or the huge shift just in my perception, is people in their late teens and early 20s not asking for a MacBook or a Windows machine, just saying, dude, give me a Chromebook. And, as long as I have O365, I have my Adobe, so everything's web-based, everything's browser-based, Google Docs, it's all there. So if you secure it, not only is it easy, it's more secure, like it has all of these positives that you check. So again, it's going to be really interesting in the coming, weeks, months, years on an overall experience. So I will stop there. Eric, I know we're almost at 11:25 and I saw questions come in, so I will do my best.
Hey, thanks, Jeffrey. Let's flip right to questions from the audience. The first one is, I like the concept of making people smile and just a little happier, but how can you do that with AI and chatbots in a way that will be appealing? For instance, your dancing baby example might just upset people who are trying to get through the chatbot to get to an actual agent.
I don't know who said that, but that's so awesome, because I said dancing baby. And when I first did the dancing baby, we demoed it and a lot of people had a smile on their face. Again, this is my blind spot, right? Some people were like, well, dancing baby might be offensive. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, what about a dog? And they said, well, what about cat people? And I said, oh man, I didn't think about that. I'm like, okay, so maybe like a dancing dog and cat. And they're like, well, what about people that have pet ferrets? It did. So you can tailor it, right? We ended up doing a Sour Patch. So the end of that story is, if anybody doesn't know, Mondelez owns Sour Patch Kids, Oreo. We have a billion brands I guarantee you eat. I ended up doing a dancing Sour Patch Kid. So Sour Patch Kid, I mean, how can you go wrong? It's a Sour Patch Kid. It's a little gummy that dances and does funny stuff on the screen. But I would say make sure you really bring in every generation that you can find, customer and or employee, and really focus on what they feel, right? Because what they feel is reality. Reality isn't reality anymore. It's the perception of how people feel about a specific thing. So my suggestion to you is, Easter eggs. We all are familiar with Easter eggs in video games. Amazon had them for a while. Google on April Fool's Day, they had the Wi-Fi that you flush down the toilet. Like, find something that is, as not, it doesn't have to be edgy. Find something that bring a smile, that you, again, it's unique to your company, to your team. Figure out how you can do it. But there's a million Easter eggs, or tell me a joke. Although unfortunately, tell me a joke bombed too. We had about 15 or 20 IBM Watson jokes that we had, where you could ask the chatbot to tell you a joke, and it turns out that half of them were like inappropriate. I don't even like. I guess AI is doesn't keep up with the times.
Great, thank you. The next question is: when everyone is remote, it's hard to have a team gathering virtually, as everyone's so tired of yet another virtual meeting. Do you have any suggestions about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenging one. I try my best to find, again, if you have a budget, sky's the limit, right? We were asked actually for finding ways to collaborate and get people back together for whatever reason, even if not in the office. And, there was like Tough Mudders and, go-kart racing and Top Golf and, picnics and days and stuff like that. But what I will tell you is, everybody has a billion meetings a day, right? So try to start, I talk about working hard versus working fun. Look up dad jokes, right? Look up a million dad jokes. And I'm sure there's mom jokes too. But I got to be careful when you say a mom joke, I think it means something different, but let's say dad jokes. And I try my best with my weekly meeting that I have with a lot of my colleagues. That's kind of like a digital experience call. We always start with our best dad joke. So the first 5 minutes is a dad joke, right? One of which was what's a pirate's favorite letter of the alphabet, right? And everybody goes, oh, it's R. And I was like, you'd think it'd be R, but it's the C that he loves, right? It sets everybody back a little bit, and it loosens up the call. It takes the bolts out of your neck, and I get it. It's challenging. It's difficult. But do stuff like that. Hey, everybody! Every week now, we're going to have everybody tell me what the joke of what's the best joke, or a dad joke, or safety minute of the week, or something they learned. Tell me something you learned in 1 minute, right? And it's funny. Some people have a difficult time with that, right? So I've said, like, hey, teach me something in 1 minute. Right? Teach me something in 1 minute. Everybody gets 1 minute. We have 5 people on the call, 10 people on the call. Teach me something in 1 minute, right? Some people stumble and we pass. Other people have a tendency to, their brain juices start to kind of move a little bit. Oh, did you know that, sea cucumbers come in different flavors? I don't know. That's not true, but something like that. Ask people to take themselves out of the meetings. Everybody knows when they join a meeting what they're joining for. Synergy, circle back, strategery meeting 2.5. Everybody knows they're going to join the meeting. Somebody's going to probably say, hey, do you have any questions? And they'll say, no, but I have a comment. And then you're going to hear them talk, and they're going to say all the bingo buzzword stuff, and you're going to want to go to sleep. Try to set the pace at the beginning of the call. And even if it's not your call, make the suggestion. Hey, can we talk about anything that's, better, or, it's just anything else.
Thanks again, Jeffrey, for an excellent keynote. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.